Macroeconomic Perspective on Understanding the Federal Budget Deficit and Inflation by Jayla Stevens. Understanding inflation and the federal budget deficit is crucial to grasp the health and direction of the economy. This presentation will cover federal budget deficit, its causes, impacts, and data trends, inflation, its causes, sector-specific effects, and its relation to the deficit, and the Federal Reserve, its management of both inflation and the deficit. Fiscal policy is the government's decision about spending taxation. Inflation is the general increase in prices over time. The federal budget deficit is when government spending exceeds revenue in a fiscal year. These are interconnected through spending, interest rates, and economic growth. Federal budget deficit occurs when the government's annual budget expenditures exceeds its revenue, leading to borrowing. The 2023 deficit was approximately $1.7 trillion, according to CBO. It is driven by mandatory spending like Social Security and Medicare, interest payments, and tax cuts. The national debt exceeded $34 trillion in the early 2024. The U.S. has run deficits for most of the past 50 years. Factors that contribute to the deficit are government spending, tax revenue, interest payments on national debt, and political and economic challenges. Social programs such as Social Security account for a good portion. The cost of healthcare and Social Security rises as the population ages. COVID-19 relief spending significantly increased the recent deficits. Tax cuts reduced federal revenue, and interest payments on the national debt are now one of the fastest growing budget items. The economy was heavily affected by the federal budget deficit. Higher deficits may lead to higher interest rate, crowding out private investment. It reduced investor confidence by increasing debt to GDP ratio. Increased payments reduce funds available for productive government investments. In short term, it can boost demand. Long term, it can slow growth. What is inflation? It is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises, eroding purchasing power. Inflation peaked at 9.1% in mid-2020, the highest it has been in 40 years. Main contributors are supply chain disruptions, stimulus spending, and wage growth. Currently, it is around 3.5% to 5%. It is measured using Consumer Price Index. Now, what causes inflations? Demand pull. More money chasing fewer goods, like stimulus checks. Cost push. The rising cost of inputs like food and oil. Built-in inflations. Expectations of higher prices pushes up wages. Internal factors like wars. Example, the war in Ukraine raised energy prices. Monetary policies also play a big role in why inflation occurs. Low interest rate policies from 2020 resulted in money supply growth, fueling inflation. Quantitative easing is an effort to enforce liquidity in the economy during the pandemic, which also contributed to inflated rates. Here is an image that visualizes how the purchasing power of the dollar has decreased and increased over the years due to recessions and inflation. How does inflation impact our economy? Well, it affects the purchasing power of the dollar. Inflation erodes purchasing power and makes it harder for households to afford goods and services. It reduces savings if interest doesn't keep pace. It hurts fixed income households the most. It can spiral into wage price inflation cycles. Wage price spirals as workers demand higher wages to keep up with the cost of living. Consumers also may pay more for essential goods like groceries. Higher fuel and electricity prices raise transportation and production costs. Does the Federal Reserve respond? It began raising interest rates aggressively in 2022. Its goal? To reduce inflation without triggering a severe recession. It raised federal funds rates from a near 0% to 5.5% by mid-2024. Tightening reduces borrowing and spending, slowing inflation. High inflation increases government costs like interest payments and index benefits, but it can also raise tax revenue like nominal income rises. The federal's response to inflation affects deficits. Higher interest rates higher interest equals more debt service. Long-term sustainability requires balanced fiscal and monetary policy. To conclude, inflation has moderated but remains above the federal's target, which is 2%. Deficit pressures persist due to entitlements and debt interest. There's a need for structural reform, tax reform, spending cuts, entitlement changes. Vigilant federal policies will remain key in managing inflation.